In this ICS Connects interview, I'm talking to Aloysius Arlando, and we talk about the importance of uniting the industry in times of crisis, working with governments, and planning to restart our businesses. So listen in and explore the future of exchange. Hello, everyone. Welcome to ICS Connect. Today, we're here with Aloysius Arlando, who wears many hats. One of them is he's the CEO of Singapore Expo. He's also the president of AIPC, the International Association for Convention Centers. He's also the president of SACEOS, the Singapore Association for Convention Exhibit Organizers. And I know I didn't get the acronyms exactly correct, kind of like how they're spelled out. But did I forget anything, Aloysius? That's about?
No, that's it. Yeah.
Today, mainly I want to focus on your role as the president of SACEOS, because I know in that context you had quite a bit to do in the last few weeks and months, and there was quite a bit of activity to really make sure that our industry gets out of the COVID-19 crisis in a stronger and resilient way. And my first question is around the importance of getting governments on board and having governments understand the importance of the meetings industry. I think our industry has struggled for a long time to really kind of explain our importance to governments and to make sure that it is understood that we bring value beyond room nights, for example. So from your point of view, when COVID-19 hit hard and we realized that lots of the players in our industry might not make it through, what was your first steps in kind of like making sure there is some sort of help for the industry? And what do you feel like, how did government react, and where do you feel we had some maybe shortcomings in kind of like as opposed to other industries?
Thank you, Mathias, and thank you for the opportunity to share with you and our colleagues. And I'm glad to be part of this, because I think there's a rich learnings that all of us can share and benefit from. We are going into truly uncharted territory with this COVID-19, and I'm sure this is not going to be the last one. And I think what's important for us is for our industry, for our enterprises, is to really build this resiliency. And I think for the first time, we really have to put in place very clear action and efforts to make that happen. When COVID struck, I think in early January, it's actually Chinese New Year. I think that was something. It's truly a red letter day for us. We heard about what's happening in China, in Wuhan. We also heard that the virus was spreading slowly, and there was immediate reactions by some economies to stem it out. And when I saw that, it really brought me back to the days of SARS. And whether you call it fortunately or unfortunately, I had the benefit of going through SARS and being involved in those operations in my younger days. But I never knew that could be such a valuable reference. And which is why I said this is not going to be over in a short time. Because there were fundamental differences. One is that this virus, that's why it's called the new coronavirus. It's totally new. And you need to give it ample time, maybe a long time, for the experts to make sense of what this is, let alone find a vaccine or find a certain treatment or therapy, which means we have to manage the environment such that we stem the potential contagion effect. Now that was at the time, so we needed to put in place measures, and that's where under my capacity as in my capacity as SACEOS president, we actually mounted several engagement sessions to understand what does it take for us to be prepared as we continue with our business. And I never knew that was the beginning of an ongoing process even to this day and beyond. So that was the beginning of the journey towards the new normal, if I can put it a bit. So we had discussions over Chinese New Year with authorities, with SGB, with MTI working level staff to understand what exactly is going on and how, because we also knew there were events coming into Singapore at that time. How do we manage those considerations? What are the key things that they have to look at first? So precautionary measures will be key. So that was when we heard about sanitizers. There wasn't safe distancing yet. It was more sanitizers, making sure we've got the mask on for those that have contracted, to have PPE, personal protective equipment, and the like. But we also knew that uh, consumer confidence is being impacted, and people be wondering, should I continue with the event or not? Should I scale down, and the like? So therefore, it's important to then relook at contractual terms. So the first few sessions that we've had with the industry was to relook at our basics. How did you do your contractual obligations, your your different clauses? And of course, the ever famous force majeure came into play. uh, oh, this is something which we can call on force majeure, which is not the case. And we found out, to our surprise, the understanding of the basic contract law was really patchy. And that's why we decided we have to level up the 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 industry by having legal clinics to make sure at least they are aware and see how best they can seek redress where it makes sense. And we've also got our legal partners to be on board through the association to help them. We also found out that it was necessary to take stock of purchasing of masks, hand sanitizers, and so we went into a little bit of a procurement exercise as well, because we felt that by aggregating the demand, we should, and through a volume basis, we'll be able to get good pricing for that. But as you know, then Singapore went fast and furious to the next level, DOSCON Orange, on 7th February, less than a week or so, and we had to ramp up efforts because immediately we knew events were being cancelled. So that's when we look at it, what assistance that needs to be put in place. And we knew we also had to shift gears to develop specific assistance packages or schemes, because the budget was coming up quite soon. So we went through rounds of discussions to look at what are the immediate pain points that we will need to address. So one was, of course, with events drying up, cash flow will be an issue. There will be credit considerations, and people will need to look at how do we survive. So the first mode was really to look at survival mode. We know that companies have some reserves, but it's not going to last them for a long time. And we needed to see how can government support it. Now, in that process, we are not alone. Many industries that make up the economy were also suffering, albeit at different stages. But being in the business events industry, we are certainly the first one out, and we are now going to find out we are going to be the last one in. So this arrangement is not going to be different from any other economies, and because whether we want to be known as part of tourism or economy, as long as it concerns travel, gatherings, and confidence, that's going to be a case where it will be the first one to be managed, and it quite easily so. So the industries or the businesses that support these industries will have to then factor this in terms of their business continuity. So that's where we look at the support in terms of capital loans, in terms of reliefs, to enable businesses to try to survive this patch, this phase. We didn't know it was going to be that long until a week or 2 weeks passed, and we found that it was really evolving so fast. And then when it went to Italy, it went to Europe, and then went to the US, and we knew that okay, it's going to be a long winter. And still they have not come to terms as to what is the possible vaccine or therapy. So it's going to be a very long drawn affair. And then even the Singapore government came out in waves, various budgetary support measures. So at all times we were in close dialogue and discussions with authorities to see how best to support our industry. To your point is, what have we discovered in the process? I think it is great to hear all these wonderful PR statements of Singapore being one of the world's leading convention cities and the like. But I think the understanding of it and the impact it creates, we have may have taken it for granted. We might have been swayed by the headlines, but when push came to shove, we found that we had to do a lot more to educate and explain, and I had to work with our members as well to establish what exactly is the MICE ecosystem. It is not just a organizer, a venue, and a supplier. There's a whole host of interworking relationships that are so interwoven that one cannot function without the other. You can't do a conference without a stage setup, audio, visual, and lights. Right? You can't do a presentation in the dark. To make it simple, and therefore we found that there are so many parts coming in. And I think that discussion led to a major dialogue with the authorities on the 2nd of April, and we pursued that. And in subsequent efforts to really secure as great a support as we can, and we fast forward to today, we are pretty glad the government has heeded our call to at least expand the job support scheme in the latest round of budget, which is termed as the Fortitude budget. Uh, and we've also got appeal lanes. So for those who need to appeal, we've established those appeal lanes. So as companies submit the appeal, the association will work at the back with the authorities to try to fast track those process. So I think I've heard a few have forgotten their appeal. So we will do that as best as we can. But more importantly, we have to bring up to speed to the authorities what is this, whether you call it business events, MICE industry, the meetings industry ecosystem. I think that, and that is a common template which we are using, and that has resulted in, I think, greater understanding. But we are not going to take it for granted. We have to continue to pursue that, because the way forward will see companies, some companies fall and fold, others will have to reposition themselves, and therefore there will be a need to see how best to support them such that the industry continues to rise and thrive.
Thank you. I have to say, as somebody who's working internationally, and we have offices in 8 different locations, Singapore has been by far, in my opinion, best example of showing kind of like early on, kind of getting people together, as you mentioned, getting the industry to understand what's going on and knowing what each of us can do in order to kind of get us through this crisis. But also then with the support schemes. I mean, there are support schemes in many countries, but so specific to the MICE industry, I have to say, Singapore is definitely one of the leading countries, at least the leading one in my experience. So that's a lot of compliments to you and the team around SACEOS to get it to that point. But my question to many of the people out there is kind of like, you said you sat down with people early on April 2nd, people from the government officials. For many of us, the access is already not there. So do you kind of like keep an open communication throughout? Kind of do you involve government ongoing in doing that SACEOS, like in any of the activities in SACEOS? How did you get a seat at the table early on to actually be able to lobby?
Yeah, I think it has to be an ongoing effort, a very conscious effort. And I think for the experience we've gone through is really to keep close relationships at all levels, at working level, at mid-level, at executive level, at political level. Uh, it's very tempting to want to go and see the minister. And this is all my pain points, my grievances. This is the plight of industry. Help us. I think it applies, I think, to all economies and our peers elsewhere. I think we also need to figure out how best to help government help ourselves. So it's not a case that I'm there, these are my needs and my wants, fulfill them. But rather, uh, what can we do to make that happen? And it's not just at the political level, but it has to be at the C-suite level of government agencies, the working level, or the ground level. Because the reality of it is the ministers are not going to do the job. The C-suite level are not going to do the job. It's going to push it down to the working level. And that's why, for me, I work at all levels to understand how best to do that, because it will impact uh, the association, the members, the business. Right? And business is actually at ground level.
Yeah.
Though policies are certainly thought about and, of course, applied to the operating environment, but the impact is at ground level. So the working level needs to be there. So I think it has to be a conscious effort to have those conversations. And it is definitely a case of different strokes for different folks. What is pitched for the political level versus what is at the ground level will have to be different, because political level is about intent, about positioning. But that's not going to keep our business going. It's the mechanics. It's the how. How are you going to go about doing it? And that's where we have to go into a deep dive with the working level to say, this is what. And as you see, we went into the identification of the SSIC codes. That's a what are you doing with SSIC codes? 5501 to 8201 and all these things. We have to comb through every single thing, getting the information out. And people are trying to understand, why are you doing this? Because it is in any economy, it's not a case where there's a directive, but it's how does it get rolled out.
Mm-hmm.
And you can't possibly cover everybody, especially in our industry. It's really multifaceted. So we have to find the low-hanging fruits. In other words, those that are obviously very direct. Organizers. There's no event organizers or developers, there's no event. Even if you have a venue and you save the venue, but there's no event, it doesn't work. So that's, I would say, a no-brainer, right? But there are organizers and there are organizers. So we need to be clear. Is the live event organizers the same as a business event organizer, same as the arts organizers? Say, as far, actually, if you're event genre agnostic, is the same, right? The important is the impact, and that's where the impact of our industry becomes much stronger, because we have a socio-economic impact. We help foster industry development agendas, like whether it's a medical meetings or whether it's to do in the area of fintech, in the area of sustainability, and so forth. We bring people together, but we're also mindful not to um, uh, belittle the other industry. So the arts and all that, I would term it as the arts and your live events. It's really to boost the creative class, which you need in any economy. So I think there are different impact. So it goes to reinforce what global associations, and we're all part of them, are saying. We have to keep that advocacy going.
Yeah.
But now more than ever, we need to demonstrate it in no uncertain terms. And it's not about we drive jobs and we drive this. Great, how? I think that's the greatest thing. And that's why we go right down into the so-called into the weeds to really attempt to demonstrate the impact, because it's going to help us. If you can't draw the line from A to B and you say it's there and you leave it to interpretation, then I think we are going to lose the plot. So I think that's something we need to bear in mind.
I think that's a very valuable point, and I think quite important for everybody also to understand kind of like, how do you go about this? Because when the house is on fire, it's too late to make connections. So you need to have connections before, so you know who
It's
to
true.
and I think many of us have underestimated that. I think for years, many took it very seriously too. Don't get me wrong, but
Yeah.
it shows these days. And just to clarify for everyone, the Singapore support package includes some wage support subsidies. It includes some money for marketing. It includes some money for digitalization. And there's quite a few other payments that go directly to individuals as well. So it's really helping companies stay afloat and get through this. But beyond that, we are now talking. So using the metaphor of the house on fire, we're saving the companies. We got to rebuild again. So what's next? So I know what you've started together with SACEOS in partnership with Enterprise Singapore and the Singapore Tourism Board is the Industry Resilience Roadmap. Can you tell us a little bit what the thought behind that is, how you structured it? And I also find it quite interesting that you included Enterprise Singapore, which is not necessarily, wouldn't have been my first thought of somebody who's been part of the MICE industry recovery phase or recovery plan.
Right. So you're right. We spent a lot of time to save lives. We now have to go to build livelihoods. So, and that would mean businesses. So if we've got if we have some reasonable support to keep us going, that's good. But now it is up to us to decide how do you want to create the destiny in a post-COVID world, knowing that the environment is not going to go back to a pre-COVID world that fast. Knowing that in Singapore, we don't have a large domestic market, very minuscule domestic market, we are highly dependent on international visitors and participation to any of our activities. We therefore know that it will take a long time for airlines to recover with all the precautionary measures in place. The cost of travel will probably go up. Companies, travel, and regulations and policies will be very conservative. Insurance will also have to rethink how they're going to go about pricing travel and participation. And I think the list goes on. So we know there are different factors at play that's going to redefine the post-COVID operating environment. So how do we then survive? And that's why we talk about what does resiliency mean for us? How do we bounce back? And how do we go forth and secure our fair share of the business? I think the first thing that comes to term is to understand, and that is everybody needs to recognize that if we can put it into our consciousness that it will not be a business as usual as in pre-COVID, is actually a very important battle to overcome. Because I think people are thinking, let's get this blip over the way and then we'll all come back. It is not going to be the case. And I think and why is it so? It's because of the contagion effect and the specter of a second peak, because this virus will mutate, and they're seeing that way. Other economies have different considerations. Some are opening up. They need to because they have large domestic market. They maybe have applying herd immunity considerations. Some may not have the great support that here in Singapore we benefit from. So that there are considerations for that. In other words, you can't have a very plug and play model. We have to go through what are the motivations and why are policies being run in that way. So when you aggregate all this, the resiliency for our industry must certainly be different. Factoring this into consideration, we therefore need to do what exactly is the plan. It's great to have guidelines, policies, and protocols and all those. How are we going to operationalize and enhance a roadmap? So it's sort of like an operational handbook we want to come up with. And so sometime as we were going through fighting for our lives, I say, okay, what is beyond that? Livelihoods. What does it take to keep businesses to go and pivot? What does pivot mean for people? Is it purely to a digital core, or is it something else? So I think that's where it were the beginnings of the industry resilience consideration. And we find that it is certainly beyond tourism. It has to be enterprise. It has to be industry transformation. So we need to have the agency that is mandated to support and transform enterprises in this equation. Hence, ESG came out. So as we went through, since March, we engaged STB, ESG, and MTI, and Workforce Development Authority all at the same time, because we need to have businesses, jobs, industry, right? And finally, of course, the government is to set the policy, what we call regulations and instruments. And so we've got those guys in, and now it's about working out the details. So we've got the working groups that deal with safe reopening, a group on the looking at what does a new business model going to be like, what are the new risks we have to consider, What are the digital foundations that we need to bear in mind? What are some of the core critical capabilities we have to put in place? And we want to use this time, as many of us are working from home or the downtime, to not waste this crisis and build on these efforts. So we can't do it ourselves. So I'm very grateful to my industry peers to come on board and really chip in as best as they can, because I think if we can help the industry, we will help ourselves.
Correct. Yeah, I think that's a very good point. I think that's extremely important, that we understand that this is not about competition right now. We all have to survive. It's extremely important to work together as closely as we can. And I actually have to say, bringing people together in these working groups and industry resilience roadmap and recovery roadmap is quite important to bring people from various players together. And I think that's the right way forward. And I like that you include Enterprise Singapore, because I do feel we have to think bigger than what our current situation, where we see ourselves currently. I think the way the industry will look a year from now, 2 years from now, will be very different than how we left it before the COVID crisis. And that doesn't have to do with kind of like low touch, high touch. It has to do with structural, fundamental changes, and we will only see what they will be in the next few weeks, months to come. And that brings me to my last question to you. What's your opinion? I mean, like, nobody has a crystal ball, but what are some of those structural changes that we will have? What do you feel like? Where is our industry moving now that we went through this, or we're still going through this? And where do you feel we come out on the other end?
I think we're probably going to get to a practical approach where different economies or destinations, different associations, we are all at different stages of development, partnerships, depth of partnerships. There is a need to find the new baseline for each and every one of us. What may work here in Singapore will certainly may not even work elsewhere, but you need to find that. So the baseline is not something where it's a linear equation. In other words, like you mentioned, we are a meetings industry. We impact economic development, social development, and all those. Well and good, but I think we also need to look at it networked. I think we are a networked economy. What we do, we cannot do by our own, by ourselves. We need adjacencies to come in. So, what is the new terms and or the new partnership compact that one needs to consider in different economies? And we've seen the power of associations coming together. I think that will be important. So within an economy, different associations need to tie in together. So whether you're a meetings industry association, or your live events, or whether you're freelancers, or whether you're the hotel associations, you need to find that common bridge, because that's what's going to happen. Because what we're going through now, it's a whole fundamental redefinition as to how business survival is going to take. Especially now, you have the possibility and the whole idea of a digital platform that can easily replace certain aspects, but not totally, because we are still social creatures. We need to meet and have fun at the same time. But I think that's where we need to think network, set the baseline for your economy and how different actors in that economy is going to work on. Go deep into what does policy rollout mean for the different economies and different cities. So in Singapore, we're going through that. As I said, we are a open economy, very small domestic market, unlike the large, whether it's in Germany or whether it's in France or Japan or China. They can benefit from the domestic push. Our domestic push, few million people, can only go so much, but we definitely need to work very hard to establish new norms of safe travel. And that's not easy because it requires a lot of reciprocal arrangements. Um, whether or not for a traveler to travel from a source market to Singapore, how are we going to manage the safety and health considerations? And likewise, when that traveler travels back to his hometown. So these are not easy things to do, but it requires um, a total systems approach to solve that. And that's why uh, we believe in the based on the industry resilience roadmap, we are going by the principle of customer centricity and customer journeys. So at each touch point, right, if the customer, whether he takes a plane, whether he consumes food in an F&B outlet, whether he goes to the parks, whether he goes to that safety assurance must be guaranteed. And it can't be I have a venue and I've got my sanitizers and I've got my thermal scanners, but elsewhere it's not the case. You will not get the business even. Because why would I come to yours? Because when I step out, I'm in red zones. I might be in green zone in your venue, but I'm red zones elsewhere. Net effect, red. So it's not gonna happen. So I think the whole idea of thinking networked, working and defining what your partnership compact is going to be, how is it going to be applied and rolled out in the destination or the city or the precinct that you're in, bearing in mind the customer journey, it's going to be key. So I think that's what I think that's the way that we have to move forward. So even if you're doing event, actually in our business, we actually have been taking that into consideration, though we tend to perhaps base it more on heads on bets because of how we are funded.
Yeah.
So therefore, we have to rethink what's your funding structure. How can you redefine the funding arrangements to keep whether associations or whether bureaus and the like alive? And I think we also have to be bold to redefine what the roles the existing actors play, so that we can be, and it may not be, as I said, one size fits all. What will be best suited for the environment of that economy or of that city?
Excellent. I couldn't agree more here. I think that's a very important point, and I think that's universally applicable. I think we all can relate to this and realize that that's important to restore customer confidence in that way and make sure we
That's true.
return safely
Yeah.
together. My very last question is a personal one to you. Is there anything you learned out of this crisis about yourself that you didn't know?
um,
I know it's a tough one.
I think
you can rock a beard. That's one.
yeah, I decided not to shave. I think it's about patience.
Yeah.
It's about listening. It's about understanding the motivations, the thinking, the person behind the pain, and to also become, I think, hopefully become a little bit wiser to differentiate whether it is a vested interest or whether it's an industry-wide interest.
Yeah.
And some of my peers, I said, yes, we are all have businesses and the like, but I think we need to think industry-wide, because there will never be a policy or a support that's going to be specifically to you and you only. It's going to be in the cohort that we are in the grouping that we are in, the industry we are in, that part of the value chain we are in. So I think that's, and therefore it's by listening and to understand where they're coming from, I think I can help to nudge and see that, if they can see that perspective and contribute, we are all better for it. Because I think here it's about truly harnessing the collective wisdom of people. And it's not a case where, oh, I'm an 18-year-old veteran, I'm a 3-year-old veteran. This virus doesn't discriminate. We all are starting from scratch. We have no clue. We have never seen coronavirus in 2019. I don't know, 5th of June, or we are now
Yeah,
3rd of June 2019, it didn't exist.
of course. Of
So,
course.
but I think certain principles are quite timeless. I think
Yes.
that's the whole idea about of this. I think that's what in a way reinforces my belief. But I need to really be even patient because I always want to move faster. And then my colleagues in my day job will always say, "I think you're moving 5 steps ahead. Come back, come back." But I think it's always about calibration.
Yeah.
And I think when we work, we have to work together. A rising tide lifts all boats, and I think that's important to think. And then whether you're a speedboat or whether you are a sampan, as the locals call it, you can still eke out a living. But you must have a rising tide, otherwise we're all stuck in the sand.
That is a perfect metaphor to end with. Thank you so much, Aloysius. This was very insightful, and thank you so much for your time. I know
It's a pleasure.
how busy you are and how many things are going on for you right now. So thank
That's
you so
okay.
much.
Okay. Thanks, Matthias. Take care.